Hello and welcome to our second session on asset management. In this session we're going to cover key asset data, how you set that up and what value you get out of that data. My name's Martin Hobbs. We're going to follow a very brief agenda in today's session. First we're going to talk about what key asset data actually is. Then we're going to talk about the product that we recommend, which is Assetblox, and give you a brief introduction to that product. And then finally, we're going to go through and configure our key data within an Assetblox product. So what is the main purpose of your asset management program? Put simply, your program is there to manage every asset that falls within the scope that's been defined, and to manage every asset throughout its life cycle, all the way from procurement to retirement. As anything happens to a particular asset that's under the management of asset management, you will make changes to the data that's associated with those assets. And it's that data that we can then report on and look at, which gives us an understanding of where our assets are if they're being used and what they're doing, and helps us to provide management data with regards to things like procurement or stores management or even starters and leavers processes. We spoke about key asset data in our last session. And here on the screen is an example of the kind of data that we may well store within our asset management database. Not least, we would have asset types, and with those asset types, we may have specific information, specific data attributes, if you will. And there is key asset data that we would be keen to capture. For example, location, cost center, department, status, or owner. The location data helps us understand where our assets physically are. So if we need to physically go and get those assets, if we need to check on them, if we need to audit, we can go to that location and find them. The cost center data enables us to understand where that asset sits within the business, potentially who's paid for that asset, or potentially who owns that asset within our particular business. The department data enables us to understand where our asset sits functionally within the business. So for example, what function those particular assets may carry out linked to the department that they are members of. The owner data asset enables us to understand who particularly has specific responsibility for each asset. And that may well be tied to, for example, a starters and leavers process where we assign assets to an owner as they begin with our organisation and as they leave our organisation as well. The status data is particularly important as it enables us to understand if the asset is being used. If the asset is set to an active data status, then we know that that asset is being used actively. If the asset is set to in stores, then we know it's spare and it's on the shelf and we can reuse it if we wish to do that. If the asset is missing or retired, for example, we know that we no longer have that particular asset. The location data is key, and the owner data is also key in terms of understanding where those assets are and who is physically responsible. Particularly if we go ahead to carry out audits, we may want to carry out audits that are based on location. We may want to carry out audits that are based on particular owners to make sure that everything is exactly where it should be within our organisation. So now I'm going to give you a very brief introduction to the Assetblox product. What is Assetblox? Assetblox is a secure cloud-hosted asset management platform. You are able to actively access your asset management platform from anywhere where you have internet connectivity. It also combines not only an online database, but it also combines a smartphone scanning app that enables you to scan and manage your assets as and when you are around your business. You're able to update those asset records as you go. That is then fed back into the database, and that's from which we can then look at that key asset data that we've been discussing to understand where our assets are, what they're doing, and who's using them. The Assetblox product is available on a subscription basis, so you can renew your subscription on an annual basis. And it's easy to use. It's very quick to start up. In fact, in the next session, we're going to show you how we can set up that key asset data, and you will see that it's very quick to get access to, very simple to set up, and does not take an awful lot of time. Assetblox has a number of key features. These are the ability to create anything as an asset type, the ability to add and manage any data attribute that we want to any asset type, The ability to update that asset data via a smartphone app. Also built in is financial functionality, so we can look at our current asset values, we can look at our depreciated asset values, we can also start to build future budget based on that depreciation for future years with regards to budgeting to replace those assets. We also have geolocation scanning, so with the handheld app we can see exactly where those assets were scanned. We have alerting and reporting, so if anything changes within our database that we wish to know about, we can receive email alerts. We have audit functionality based on location and based on users. So with each location and user, we get a list of exactly what should be in that location or should be assigned to that user, and we can then scan and tick off those assets as we go. Assetblox also has consumables management, so it has the ability to set up, if you like, stores or stock. You can scan in using the retail barcode and scan out using the retail barcode, along with minimum stock alerts should you need them. Assetblox also has agent-based inventory. For the PC, Windows and Mac platforms, we have the ability of getting hardware inventory, software inventory, and we also have the ability to set up and manage simple license compliance and also manage Windows updates remotely to make sure that those devices are secure. All of this adds in with that asset data to provide us with a really good in-depth view of everything that should be within our organization. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick switch through into our Assetblox instance, and we're going to show you how we can configure that key data within Assetblox. So here we are within our Assetblox console. Now this is a brand new box, been spun up online, hosted in the cloud. The first thing we need to do is we need to set the application configuration. So in our application configuration, we click on the menu and we have a few options here. First of all, we can change the name of the overall system. Second, we can change the logo that appears up here on the top left-hand corner. Third, we can change the theme. So I'm going to change that to a light theme. And then there are a couple of extra options in here that we can add in depending on the functionality. We'll talk about those in future videos. I'm going to save my application configuration settings now. And you can see that my scheme has changed. My name has changed at the top. And we're all ready to go. So if I pop out the menus at the side here, what we're now going to do is we're now going to set up the base data that we might want to work with within our asset management program. So again, come to application configuration. This time we're going to look at locations. If I click on my locations, I can now add in my locations. So the first location I'm going to add in is going to be our office here in Peterborough. Now if I want to run some audit alerts on Peterborough, so in other words, if I actually want to scan all my assets on a regular basis and tick them off on an audit, I can click that and then I have additional options that are available. For now, I'm going to leave that unticked and we're going to add that location in. Now I'm going to add in another location, so we're going to say London is another location. We add that in. And we're going to add in one final location. Let's be aspirational, and we're going to go for New York. Add that one in. We now have our location set within our application. And we can associate assets with a physical location. If we wanted to associate our assets with a department, for example, we might want to think where functionally within our organization our assets sit. We can add our departments in here. Similarly, we can say we have a sales department. We can add in another. We can say we have a tech support department. Very important at this moment. And we can add in another one. Let's say, for example, human resources. We now have departments, so we can now associate any asset records that we have with locations and departments. If you need to account financially for your assets, you may want to introduce cost centers. Cost centers will tell you who physically within the organization has paid for or maybe owns those particular assets. So let's just add in some generic cost centers. I'm going to add in CC-001 as one cost center. I'm going to add in another CC-002 as a second cost center. And just for the sake of the demo, we're going to add in the third, which is CC, you guessed it, 003. So we now have the ability to associate assets with a location, with a department, or a cost center. Next, we move on to status. Status Counting is very important for asset management because it allows us to understand if an asset is actively being used. If it is actively being used, we may want to apply the status of active to that asset. If we've lost track of that asset, we may want to apply the status of missing, so we know we have to chase it down and find out where it's gone. Potentially that then may lead that asset to being marked as being stolen, as it's gone missing from our organisation. Or if something's been retired or removed, in other words, we no longer use that asset, we can mark it as retired. Then at the bottom here we have the asset status of stores. Now this for me tells me that it's spare equipment that's in stores, equipment that maybe is not being used by users at the moment, and so it has been shifted onto a shelf to be stored ready for future use. What I'm going to do is I'm going to add in a single status, and I'm going to add in this status, the status of in stock. That status for me is going to signify that this is a brand new piece of equipment that is held within a storeroom. And so we might want to mark it differently to that which is in stores. So we've done locations, we've done departments, we've created cost centers, and we've verified our status. The final thing we might want to do is we might want to add in some users. So if we go to our user tab, we can then add a user, and I'm just going to add in George, and George is going to be there's his user ID, pops up as default. I'm going to give George a password so that he can log into the system that I will share with him at a later date. And then I can select the role that he has. He's either a user role or an admin user, or he has mobile access, which gives him the ability to actually log in to the application and to make changes when scanning barcodes. Let's get rid of that. We don't need to save the password. So there we have it. We've set up our asset data in terms of location, departments, cost centers, status, and users, which means we can now see if we have an asset record, who's using it, where are they physically with the location, where are they functionally within departments, and who owns that particular asset from a cost center perspective. On the next video, what we will take a look at is asset types and how we can create asset types within Assetblox and add data to those asset types to enable us to manage that data effectively.